Hey VC, what's up? It's me, yours truly. Excuse me. I am back to post a quick video here. This is going to be part two of the to seal or not to seal series of videos that I'm going to do here, where I'm just kind of doing some videos touching on some of the different talking points around, I guess, the debate of whether to keep albums sealed or not, and then also picking one category to share about 10 sealed albums that I have in that category. So if you missed part two, go over and check it out. It should just be 2 or 3 videos ago here in my channel. But yeah, this is part two. So today we're going to go with the subject matter of, does keeping your albums sealed means there's such a greater chance of them being warped, or does it warp your albums? And the genre / category of sealed albums I'm going to show today are greatest hits / live albums. Because, you know, for the most part, live albums are people playing all their greatest hits. So that'll be a category. So we'll just kind of jump right into it. Playing in the background, of course, Tracy Chapman, Crossroads. Fantastic album. I listened to her debut album about a week or two ago and then decided to pull out Crossroads and put that in my rotation. And, you know, it's one of those artists where you know it, but it's kind of easy to forget, you know, and then when you go back and actually listen to it and you're like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. So yeah, that's Tracy. But let's kind of jump right into it. So the category today is going to be, or just kind of asking the question, does keeping your album sealed warp your albums? Well, that's kind of not necessarily a black or white answer. It's kind of a yes and no answer. And even more so for me, it's kind of a common sense answer. All right. So the one thing that we do know is that if you can actually get past the horrible quality control of many pressing plants these days and actually get a record in hand that's the way it's supposed to be, nice and flat, mint condition, for the most part, 99% of the time, there's only 2 things that are going to warp that record if you received it in perfect condition. And that is some type of excessive heat exposure or some type of undue pressure being added to the record, right? Because obviously you have a stiff piece of vinyl, and any type of pressure that's trying to bend or flex that stiff piece is, over the course of time, can cause it to warp and flex and warp, right? So let's take heat out of the equation and all of that. And also let's just take properly storing your albums out of the equation, because we know that's part of that goes under pressure anyway. But so talking about just the shrink. So how can shrink warp a record? The only way it can really do that is if, I'll just use kind of Cameo as an example here, if the shrink is so tight on the album that it's actually causing the album and the cover, do this without damaging anything, to flex. Like you may pick up an album that's in shrink and you see it's kind of flexing like that, right? That's obviously because the shrink is squeezing it so tight that the album is starting to kind of give way, if you will. Now, if that is the case, then yes, if you have enough shrink squeezing on an album enough to flex the cover, then obviously the album inside of it is being flexed too, right? So that's where it goes back to kind of the common sense thing to me. If you see an album being bent, the same way if you saw me holding your album and bending it with my fingers, and I stood in your house for 10 years just like that, outside of calling the cops, you would say, okay, Brandon, stop doing that, because eventually you're going to warp that record if you stand there for 10 years and hold it like that. So same thing with the shrink. Now, if you look at me holding the album and I'm just holding it without applying pressure on the edges, and I stand like that for 10 years, at the end of 10 years, you're going to say the album is still probably fine. You probably still call cops, but the album is probably going to be fine. So it's no different with the shrink. So if you're ever debating about whether a sealed album has the potential to be warped or anything like that, just check out the shrink. Do you see any pressure being applied on those corners? Usually if you have an album that's flexing to the point of flexing with shrink, the one thing that you can't do is grab, now this is a sleeve of course, so, but you can't grab that shrink and you have no ability almost to pull any or get any grip on the edge of that shrink if it's that tight. Typically, if you can get any type of a finger pinch grip, it's going to be nowhere near tight enough to actually warp the record, especially if you have it stored properly with your other records. No way it's going to warp that over time. because there's no pressure there to warp it. So again, that's kind of my common sense take on just look at the album that you're dealing with. I actually had a situation a couple times where there was a guy, this record store that had some overstock stuff from like he got from somewhere. So it was older pressings that had been sealed for like 20 something years, and it wasn't very expensive stuff, right? It was, you know, some basic 80s stuff and things like that, the $9. But there was a couple of them that had the shrink that was like that was very tight, and I could see that it was flexing a little bit. So I actually asked him, hey, with this, would you mind, I know this is like old overstock stuff, would you mind if I open this? If it's perfectly flat and everything's okay, I'm definitely going to buy it, no questions asked. But if it's warped, he's like, yeah, I wouldn't want anybody to, you know, grab something warped anyway, go ahead and do it. And so I opened it and they both were fine, and I bought them. So even when I'm picking up, for someone that has as much sealed stuff as I do, even when I'm grabbing sealed stuff, or I have sealed stuff in my collection, I pay very close attention to that, because that type of pressure over time can warp. But yeah, don't go around with the idea that just because it's in shrink, the opportunity for warping is so much greater. No. Evaluate each album, okay? Because you can have just the opposite effect too. Let's say, for instance, like these music on vinyl pressings, which I really, really love music on vinyl. I always refer to them as the poor man's MoFi, because they make quality pressings. You know exactly what you're going to get every single time you get a music on vinyl pressing. The quality control, it's always great. Sound quality is always great. But you're not paying $40, $45 for an album like you do with MoFi. These are in the $20 range, which is so again the poor man's MoFi to me. But what I discovered over the course of time is that when you get music on vinyl pressings, they don't put their albums in shrink. They come sealed in these nice sleeves, which, as you can see me kind of moving it back and forth there, that has plenty of room, so no worry about, you know, any of that pressure being added to the record. And even the sleeve itself gives plenty of room for the record inside. But what you get by now having plenty of room on a sealed record is, on about 3 or 4 copies I've received, you'll get that. Because the record can move around so easy in shipping, or while these albums are sealed. So you kind of have just the opposite worry of warping. This one you're going to worry more about seam splits with a sealed copy of music on vinyl. So again, that's kind of going back to what I'm saying about, you just have, to me, it's not a good yes or no if something bad will happen from keeping your record sealed. It's kind of a using your common sense. Some albums, it's nice, sealed, sturdy, it'll be perfectly fine. Some albums, no, you probably better open that probably sooner than later, because it maybe will warp. Other albums, you may need to open it because there's too much room, and your albums are, you know, nowhere near being warped because there's too much room, but now that's a problem for the cover, you know. So that's kind of my take on the whole sealed album thing, or on the if it warps your albums or not. Use common sense. Physics is what we're talking about here. All right, so now diving into some of the sealed albums I have in my greatest hits / live album category. I think I pulled out 10. Well, I pulled out 11, but there's one artist I pulled out 2, so that kind of counts as 1 to me. But the first one here, one of my favorites, which is Tina Turner, Simply the Best. I was so happy a couple years ago when they pressed this, because it's definitely my favorite go-to Tina album. I've had the CD for years that I play all the time. I have the DVD, Simply the Best, with all the videos on it, and I probably like watching that more than even playing the vinyl or listening to the CD, which maybe is why I haven't opened this. But the one thing that got me about this album, and also maybe kept me from opening it right away, when I go to the DVD, my 2 favorite videos and favorite songs to watch and listen to are The Best, love that video, and then Look Me in the Heart. Fantastic track that never quite made it to the, you know, the #1 levels of some of Tina's other stuff, but one of her best tracks to me. And for whatever reason, they left that track off of the vinyl pressing. I wanted to be pissed off, but I was so happy that they issued it on vinyl, period. So I guess those emotions kind of balanced out. But Yeah, why did they do that? Bothered me so much, but fantastic album. If you don't have any other Tina, this will definitely cover you till you can get into some of her other stuff. The Best, I Can't Stand the Rain, What's Love Got to Do With It, Let's Stay Together, other great tracks, Typical Male, We Don't Need Another Hero from Beyond Thunderdome, Private Dancer, Better Be Good to Me, the Nutbush, City Limits, River Deep. I mean, just, that's my girl. Love Tina. Next year, Bruce Springsteen's Greatest Hits. This is a 1995 original pressing there. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I decided to keep it sealed. They've done a couple different reissues of this, so it's not a hard album to get it all, which is nice. So it's, plenty for everyone to get their hands on them. Goes back to kind of his early stuff, starting with, with Thunder Road, Born to Run, and all of that. Goes up through the Born in the USA years, and even into like Human Touch and stuff like that. And it also has the tracks Secret Garden and what was the other one? Oh, Streets of Philadelphia is also on here too. So great 2 LP set there. And again, I decided to keep that one sealed because it's an OG pressing. And this right here, Guns N' Roses, this just came out last year, or 2020. So Greatest Hits, nice to have and all that good stuff, but I've had the CD forever, so no overwhelming urge to feel like I had to open the vinyl here. And my boy, Billy Idol, very best of. Billy for me is kind of my new wave legend, because those of you that have heard me tell the story before, and I won't go into the long version, but I moved from one city on one side of the tracks to another city to the other suburb side of the tracks, and never been introduced to rock, new wave, metal, anything like that whatsoever. And one day I'm at home vacuuming, TV is on, volume's off, and I see this face appear on the TV. Guy with this blonde spiked hair, doing the whole lip thing and all that, and I'm like, that seems freaking cool. I'm like 5th grade here. I'm like, that seems freaking cool. I go and turn off the vacuum, turn up the volume, and it's the video for Eyes Without a Face to Billy Idol. And the very next video that came on was With or Without You by U2. And I'm just like, my mind is being blown. That was my introduction to MTV and new wave music. And I sat there the rest of the day and just binge watched that channel to no end. I remember hearing the Eagles, Hotel California for the first time that day, and just, that was a good day. A very impactful day in my life for sure. But yeah, the very best of Billy Idol, Dancing with Myself, Hot in the City, White Wedding, and of course a bunch of stuff off of his favorite album of mine, which is Rebel Yell. So you have Rebel Yell, Eyes Without a Face, Flesh for Fantasy, Catch My Fall, Moni Moni, Cradle of Love, LA Woman, and a ton of other things on here too. So a really solid 2 LP set, especially if you don't have any other Billy Idol in your collection. But the Greatest Hits or Rebel Yell is an album you should absolutely have. Next here, Eric Clapton Unplugged. Of course, this was a live performance. For someone like me who's not a big fan of live performances, there are 3 that have always been completely magical to me. And one of them I'm going to show after this, or a couple records from now. The other one was The Dance by Fleetwood Mac, absolutely amazing. And this one, Unplugged by Eric Clapton. I mean, he freaking nailed it here. And part of the big magic of that is typically when you have a song like Layla, which is kind of an upbeat song, and then someone does it in kind of a more slower, mellow, acoustic type version. Usually whether you go either way with that, something usually gets lost in the translation. When most bands do that, it either gets better or it gets a little worse. I cannot tell you which version is actually better of Layla between how he did Unplugged and the Derek and the Dominoes version. They are both absolute perfection, and it's just amazing. Like, even the complete meaning of the song seems to have changed just by how he played it. So just fantastic stuff. So this is the one where I say I kind of chose 2, or I'm counting this as 1 because it's kind of the same band. You have Kiss World, and then Smashes, Trashes, or Thrashes and Hits. which is again a nice OG copy with a hype sticker there, but two that I kind of decided to keep sealed as well. Just has, you know, all their basic greatest hits that most of you guys kind of know on there. And actually, well, yeah, we'll leave it there. Next, we'll go to Morrissey. This is the best of Morrissey. Very interesting artist in my book. I mean, obviously the legend that he is, of course, going back into the Smiths too. But the thing I find so interesting about Morrissey, and I'll take a quick minute since I'm, again, here to talk about music. He's very I compare him a lot to Michael Jackson for a very specific reason. And what that reason is, I'd like to know what you guys think about this in case you didn't see when I talked about this in a previous video months and months ago. There's always kind of that debate between who is the bigger pop star. Was it Michael Jackson or was it Prince? Both complete and total legends. No one else can do what either one of them did. They both were really kind of the pinnacle of pop music star success. Like, you really can't get much bigger than them. You know, like you have your Beatles, you have your Elvis Presley, and then you have your Prince and your Michael Jackson. Kind of like, there's just some people that you'll just never surpass, right? And there are two of them. So knowing that they've crushed everyone else in that regard, who do you say is the #1 pop star of those two, of the two greatest? And I've always leaned towards Prince as being that #1. And the reason why, again, they both have stuff that's so unique. You know, you hear a certain scream or welch, that's Prince's thing, and he does it all the time. You hear a hee-hee or whatever else with Mike, or da or shamon or whatever else, it's Mike. Like, no one else does that, and it's his thing. But the reason why I give, and you'll kind of see how I'm tying this into Morrissey, the reason why I give Prince the nod is because the one thing that Prince could do, or he did, maybe Michael could have done this, but he didn't. The one thing that Prince could do is he could take what he did and make other people superstars because of his genius, right? So Prince could take all his writing and his amazing stuff, but then he takes Manic Monday and throws it to the Bangles, they're stars. He takes Nothing Compares to You and throws it to Sinead O'Connor, she's a star. You know, he takes Love Bizarre, throw it to Sheila E., boom. He takes When You Were Mine, throws it to Cyndi Lauper, and you can go on and on and on and on. Vanity, The Time, and like all these amazing songs that very different artists, you know, different approaches, different styles and everything else, took his stuff and became stars with it. Michael never did that. And even more so, if you listen to a lot of Michael Jackson's music and you just go to the instrumentals, it's poppy, it's stuff that maybe makes you want to dance a little bit, but you don't listen to most of the instrumentals and think, that is just freaking amazing. No, it's when Mike jumps on and he delivers the way that he can deliver. His voice was like a 15-piece band, just his delivery and what he could do. And he takes a decent, cool instrumental and turns it into the most amazing thing you ever heard. You know, which is why when you heard songs from the Jacksons, stuff like Torture or Tell Me I'm Not Dreaming by Jermaine Jackson, you listen to one of his brothers sing the first verse, mediocre. Listen to Mike do the second verse, you're like, oh my God, that should have been on Thriller. Like, that's so amazing. Mike was the magic himself. Prince could give his magic to other people. So I'm going through the whole rambling. Number one, 'cause it's fun to talk about. But number two, that's kind of the impression that I get with Morrissey, is he's very, very Michael Jackson-like. In other words, he could write lyrics down that says, I woke up this morning and went downstairs, got a cup of coffee. It was a little hot, so I let it cool down. Then I went to work, and it was an okay day. And he'll take that, which is nothing spectacular, let him sing it and deliver it in his Morrissey, the Smiths kind of way, and it's like the most amazing thing you've ever heard. So he definitely had that Michael Jackson type of quality, where just the way he delivered, no matter how simple it was or whatever else, because 9 times out of 10, when you heard him singing something, it sounds like he was just reading it out of some girl's diary that he snatched. But that was his genius. But anyway, I'm curious what you guys think about that. And that's not to say he didn't have, you know, some very good, you know, very deep hits and stuff that was really cool. So don't get the wrong impression there. But in general, there's a lot of moments between his solo career and the Smiths where it's like, You can insert any story that you want to tell about what happened in your day there, give it to Morrissey, and he'll make it into something that sounds like the most amazing thing ever written. But that's what made him/them great. Next, Eurythmics Greatest Hits. Nice 12-piece set, all their great stuff on there. And again, I'm pretty comfortable swinging to the CD on this in most cases, so something nice about having the sealed copy there. And not that it's like valuable or anything. I mean, it came out in 2016. It's like a $20 record, but still, just kind of like it. The Best of REM in Time, 1988 to 2003. Another really amazing album. And I've probably kept this one sealed because I tend to go to a lot of the REM studio albums all the time. So most of the stuff that I want to listen to by them, I almost like the studio album better than, I can't say that. I just haven't gone to it. Let's just put it that way. But, you know, if you don't have any other REM in your collection, this is definitely a very good piece to have, or at least to start with. Because, you know, you get stuff like Man on the Moon, The Great Beyond, What's the Frequency, Kenneth? I just name a few here. Losing My Religion, Stand, Night Swimming, Everybody Hurts. Some of their really great tracks. And of course, in my opinion, their best track of all time, which is Orange Crush. That freaking song is just musical perfection to me. It's just so awesome how it's so kind of upbeat, dancey, very poppy, but yet in elements of the vocal delivery, it's so kind of almost dark and has like some, from a feeling standpoint, kind of some goth elements in it. It's just one of those perfect type of pop songs. I mean, it really is, and definitely my favorite track by them. And last but not least, this was that of the three I thought perfect live albums I mentioned before. I mentioned The Dance by Fleetwood Mac and Eric Clapton Unplugged. And this will be the third one that I would say is pretty much perfection, where a live album that matches, if not in many cases, beats the studio album version of many of the songs that they performed. The Eagles' Hell Freezes Over. I was so very happy when they pressed this. I think it came out in 2019. This is a German pressing, the 25th anniversary. And I think part of the reason why I kept it sealed, because again, I have the DVD, so oftentimes when I listen to this, I like watching the live concert with it. But I kind of thought that this might be one of those pieces that would turn grail really fast. So I thought, well, if I can enjoy listening, I'm still enjoying listening to it when I want to, keep it sealed, why not? So I kind of did. But it hasn't really, kind of just stayed at the same price. So, which is good, because that means there's plenty of them out there, and everyone who wants to get a copy can probably still has access to one, which is great. But yeah, still just such a nice, beautiful piece, and I guess maybe as long as I wanted it on vinyl, there is definitely still some pleasure I get about having just this awesome, nice, mint sealed copy of it. Sorry about that, guys. Got a quick phone call there. So, but yeah, let me know what you think about the Morrissey Michael Jackson thing that I talked about. I'd be very curious about that. I think that would be kind of a fun discussion. And let me know what you think about the warping thing with sealed albums as well, kind of what we touched on at the beginning of this video. So as always, thanks for checking out the vids. I appreciate all you guys watching, appreciate all my subscribers, and we'll see you soon for part 3. All right, take care, guys.